Good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to Dramabuds. I'm Francine, I really love K-dramas, and I'm going to spend as much time as I want talking about them. Welcome to my podcast. So, hi everyone. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about, I guess, my favorite underrated K-drama. I mean, I've been in the K-drama world for like 9 months by now, and I still feel like I haven't heard anyone talk about this show, which is very strange for me because I really love it. And I think it's one of those big brain shows, intellectual shows that I feel like, people should appreciate if they like smart, well-written shows. I don't know. Okay, today we're talking about Life, the medical drama from 2018 starring Lee Dong-wook and Cho Sung-woo. And once again, a little background on me and how I ended up here. Once again, this is my sister's fault. So late last year, she started watching K-dramas for some random reason. I don't know why. Because of that, we ended up here. But okay, going back, I digress. This was one of the first shows she started watching, and I wasn't really watching with her, but I was bored. It was probably Christmas break at that time, so I just sat beside her and we were watching this. And okay, I mean, I personally didn't care much about it. Like, I wasn't a K-drama fan, right? I wasn't hooked on K-drama. So I just thought, okay, whatever, another show. I wasn't too attached to it. But I remember liking it a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was okay. I didn't know what good or bad was back then. And now, we are here. I am hooked on K-dramas. Been here for 9 months. And I thought recently, a few weeks or a month ago, after we realized that we have developed our tastes, we are better watchers now. We know what we're watching. We know what we like and what we dislike. We thought of rewatching Life because, it wasn't bad at all. Even when we didn't know anything about K-dramas, we thought, okay, this isn't bad. And, maybe now that we're a lot smarter and our tastes are refined, maybe we'll appreciate it more. And that's how we ended up rewatching this show. It wasn't because we absolutely loved it that we needed to watch it again. It's more like we are better watchers, better viewers now. Let's give it another try and see if it holds up to our newbie, fresh eyes who didn't know anything yet. So, Life has the same writer as Stranger 1 and 2. So you kind of have similar vibes. And it doesn't help that, Cho Sung-woo is also the main character here. But I digress. It's kind of similar in vibes in many, many ways. I have not watched Stranger. My sister did. She says it's really pretty much similar, but very different in ways that I will talk about later. Please remind me that I should be talking about why I like this, or I think I would like this more than Stranger. Anyway, so it's a medical drama, but it's not really about the interesting cases or the controversial dramatic stories. It's more about the power struggle between the hospital administration or the owners of the hospital and the doctors. So, our two main characters. First is Ye Jin-woo, played by Lee Dong-wook. So he's an ER doctor, and Jin-woo has a younger brother, Ye-sun-woo, played by Lee Kyu-young, who can't walk after a car accident when he was a kid, where they also lost their father. And ever since that accident, since he was a kid, Jinwoo wasn't in the accident. It was just his younger brother, Sunwoo. Anyway, Jinwoo has been having hallucinations of his brother. Hallucinations where his brother is walking and just around him when when Sunwoo should not be. And ever since he was a kid, he was seeing a psychiatrist, who was director Lee Bo-hoon, played by Chon Ho-jin of Sangkok Hospital. And eventually he decided to become a doctor himself, and he studied in that university and started working for Director Lee in Sangkok Hospital. Along the way, he's basically closest to two people. His colleague, Lee Noel, played by Won Jin-ah, and Ju Kyung-moon. Ju Kyung-moon, played by Yoo Jae-myung. Well, there. I'm genuinely struggling to think of what his character is aside from his relationships to people. But I guess Jinwoo's a very self-righteous person. He's self-righteous. He has like principles and ideals, and he's not passive about it. He's a bit rebellious, actually. He's pretty rebellious, and his rebellion, his actions often put him at odds with Gu Sung-hyo, played by Cho Sung-woo. So Mr. Gu is the new president of Sangkok University Hospital, and he's not a doctor actually. He is an employee. Wow. He's an employee of the Wajong Group. It's a conglomerate that he's been working for many, many years. And he, started out essentially from the very bottom as a personal assistant to the current Chairman Cho Nam-yong, played by Jong Moon-song. And Mr. Gu, at the start of the show, is just very cold, very like business forward, business only. And he's basically just managing the demands of the Wajong Group, the hospital owners, and the clamors of the doctors. And like the interesting thing about life is that it starts immediately. Like there's no build up. Immediately, Director Lee dies. And we're kind of like trapped or like caught in the middle of the action, essentially, where like the current struggles in the hospital was that Director Lee was the one pretty much fighting against Mr. Gu's pay for performance scheme, right? And now that he's dead, there's no one to oppose Mr. Gu's plans to, make the hospital earn more money. Which his very first mandate actually was to send doctors from from 3 departments off to a smaller regional hospital. That's the ER, the OB/GYN department, and the pedia department. And Ye Jin-woo finds out that these 3 departments are actually the lowest earning departments in the hospital. They make the least money, and so it's not necessarily like they're doing this, they're sending these doctors away from these departments because the regional hospital needs doctors from these departments. He basically realizes that it's a financial move, and so he exposes that financial report to make people become outraged and prevent the move from happening there. And you know what? There is way more plot to talk about. That's the story arc number 1 of X, I guess. But so much goes on in this plot that I honestly can't even go farther than this. Because I mean, it's only 16 episodes, but I feel like every episode is, a story arc and a half. I'm kidding. It's not that convoluted or anything. It's just a lot. And I feel like there are no throwaway like scenes or story arcs. Like everything really ties together and it just keeps moving and moving and moving. But, for the rest of the show, it's essentially just, once again, the power struggle between the hospital owners and the doctors. And Mr. Gu being like the middleman of these parties, he's trapped in the middle of it. But he's not just like doing his job and making these decisions to do his job and to earn money for the hospital or for Wajong Group. He's also correcting the faults of the doctors. Like some of their practices are really they're wrong. You're not supposed to be doing this as doctors. But doctors being doctors, they kind of stand up for each other, cover up for each other, and he's the one who's like standing firm and saying, no, we're not gonna keep doing these practices. And everyone thinks like, oh, he's just saying that because he's not a doctor, he doesn't understand anything. There's a lot of like condescension and like clannish, cliquish behavior from the doctors, and it's kind of like Mr. Gu is the one correcting them for the ways that they're very set on their ways, and he's the one who calls them out on it, right? And meanwhile, Ye Jun-woo, he kind of exposes the faults of the management, which of course puts him at odds with Mr. Gu. But he's not being like rebellious for the sake of being rebellious or just for, being contrary. I think his main motivation really is his very close relationship to the deceased, the late director Lee, and how he kind of wants to protect the hospital that director Lee left behind. Right? So Director Lee, like, he was a staunch advocate against, Mr. Gu's proposals or his schemes to make the hospital earn more money. And like, now that Director Lee is gone, no one will really fight back as firmly as Director Lee would to Mr. Gu. And so Ye Jun-woo kind of takes that position, but not directly, because he's not really a chief or anything. He's just a fellow or an attending or something. And, if he thinks that Mr. Gu is turning them into sellouts, into cash cows, he's making them do... I mean, Mr. Gu isn't perfect. He also does some immoral things, some things that, as doctors, you kind of feel like that's wrong. We shouldn't be doing this to our patients. And so Ye Jun-woo is the one calling him out on it, or calling, the Wajong group out on it. And yeah, he's kind of he's a whistleblower. There's the word. Ye Jun-woo's a whistleblower. But, his whistleblowing helps the doctors. And so they don't really, call him out or ostracize him because of that. There. Okay. just that's like the tip of the iceberg for this show. This show is so much more than that. And I mean, I really don't want to go through all the plot lines and everything, because we could really take all day. It's very it's just tied together so well that it's difficult. It's really difficult to describe it. So I suggest perhaps that you should watch it. It's really not as boring or as serious. I mean, it's pretty serious, but it's not as boring as you would think it is. Okay, I mean, I feel like life is so underrated. It really is underrated. I mean, I feel like people compare it to Stranger a lot. Of course, same writer, same vibes, essentially. Different director, yeah. But, I mean, I feel like the writer has so much say in what goes on, more so than usual. I have not watched Stranger, but my sister did, both seasons already. And she says, like, yeah, it has a similar vibe, but life has more, like, character study moments. I shouldn't say that Stranger doesn't focus on the characters at all, but it's really very plot heavy. It's really about getting the plot moving. And, life dwells a bit more on like backstories and the characters and their emotions and all, and their reactions to things. And I think that appeals to me more. And I can imagine, like, the plot is not as thick as Strangers, but it's pretty darn thick compared to the other K-dramas I've watched. The thing is, I've watched plot-driven shows that keep moving. I've watched Hot Stove League, of course. I love that show. But I can't describe it blow by blow, arc by arc, the way I described Hot Stove League. Because, yeah, as I mentioned, Stranger Things, the plot is very much interwoven with each other, plotline after plotline. It's not clean cut, right, between the major story arcs. It's well paced, and they're like little pieces that build up and fall into place until oh, apparently this was what was going to happen in the next story arc. And I think that's just great writing. That's really amazing plot writing, right? And okay, another thing that was difficult for me to talk about was the characters. Because I mean, it's not like, oh, Jinu and Mr. Gu are the only characters that have decent stories and good backstories and do things in the plot. Like, no. So many of these characters are fleshed out. Like, they have backstories and motivations that explain like how they ended up playing a role in this story arc and stuff. And the thing is, like, yeah, most of the supporting characters aren't just like, oh, he's the comedic relief. Oh, he's the nice best friend. Oh, she's the cranky old doctor or something. Like, they don't really fall into those archetypes. I think that's the word, archetypes. They actually play roles in the plot lines, and I don't know, I just feel like, yeah, at some point this supporting character will take a back seat position in the plot at the moment, but like they serve the role well when they were relevant to the plot. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like there are really no completely useless supporting characters out there. And I think that's also great character writing. Like, it's not just the backstory. You know, you can have a great backstory but be essentially useless in the current plot. But yeah, they each play the roles really well and build up like the world and the tension and the conflict in the show. I think that's great. I mean, I just stopped at the two protagonists, at Jinu and Mr. Gu, because I mean, I could go on about Jinu's younger brother Sunwoo and his struggles being on a wheelchair. He studied. Here's his story. So he studied to be a doctor, even, you know, in a wheelchair. His mother would push him around and take him to school and everything. And so he actually plays a role in the story arc because he works in the insurance agency, something like that. And he had to audit the hospital because of the deputy director who, you know, in the big showdown discriminated against his disability. And then Jinwoo had to fight for him and defend him, all his hard work to become a doctor, to become an orthopedic surgeon despite his disability. And also Sunwoo is in love with Noul for all these years, and so like he feels like he wasn't even seen as an option, as a romantic option to her, not just because they're friends, but because he also has insecurities about his disability and all that. And you know, Noul is, I guess, she has great character also. I could say a lot about her. Chief Ju ran for the director position because he was previously close to Director Lee, and his previous regional hospital was shut down right as he was trying to run for the hospital director there. And he's very passionate, and he doesn't turn away any patients, and he's overworked, and he doesn't even know his daughter is in high school already. And I mean, I could go on. I'm sorry I went on. I could go on because these characters, there's a lot to say about each of them, right? I could go on, but to spare you another 2-hour podcast, I will stop at Jinu and Mr. Gu. Okay, I'll stop there. But my point is, it's great. The characters are really all very interesting, and they're important to the plot, and to their relationships to each other are pretty interesting. Okay, I'll stop there. Moving on. I love the theme of this show. Okay, I love how it portrays that neither side is entirely good or bad. Like, the doctors aren't, oh, we are the paragons of morality and goodness in the world, and the hospital owners, the Wajong group, the administrators, they're evil. They are capitalists who do not care for human lives. It's not preachy in that way. Like in one plot line, the doctors are right. Like, Mr. Gu, you are a filthy capitalist. Why are you making why are you making the doctors sell supplements that aren't legitimate, like medicines for their diseases or whatever? I mean, it's supplements from like a subsidiary pharmaceutical company that is also owned by the Wajong Group. So all the money is just circulating, right? And all going to the Wajong Group. It's like, you filthy capitalist, what are you doing? This is terrible. This is a terrible practice, right? So in that instance, Mr. Gu is wrong. But in another instance, wait, I'm thinking about the one where the doctors are wrong. Okay, I remember. So there's this plot line essentially where the cancer center, someone died because a resident or a doctor gave the wrong medicine or administered it intravenously when it's supposed to be intramuscular. I don't know. I am not a doctor. I'm not a med student. I don't want to be. But the point is, like, they made a medical error, right? And like the other doctors were just saying, like, they were kind of excusing it by saying, like, oh, it's because we're so tired, we're so overworked. Like, many of the doctors were saying that. It's like, it's an awful thing that happened, but it makes sense because we're also overworked and tired. And then they blamed the management. They blamed Mr. Gu. Like, you're the one who fired so many nurses, so many doctors, right? Because you had to fire so many people, we had to make up for it by working more hours. So it's your fault that we're tired. But Mr. Gu's point was like, just because you're tired doesn't mean it's okay or it's excusable to make errors that cause deaths, right? And then I remember someone from the ER department saying, like, we're just lucky. The ER department is just lucky that, if we make some errors, our patients didn't die. But if they did, we would be in the position of the cancer center. Right? We were just lucky this time. But next time, maybe we're gonna do something. We're gonna make a misstep. Someone's gonna be too tired to double check the doses or what medicine they're giving, and then someone will die, and then we're going to be in trouble. But in the general sense, like, yeah, okay, it makes sense that you're exhausted and you're overworked and all, and perhaps there are flaws in the system and in the management, but your actions still affect human lives. And so that's not a free pass. Being tired is not a free pass to essentially, having killed someone, even by accident, even because you're tired or anything, right? That's so, like, okay, yeah, we get it. Yeah, doctors are overworked, of course, but yeah, once again, their actions are just actions cost a human life, right? And it's not like, oh, they did everything they could and the treatment just didn't work out, the surgery failed, or they died, they died on the table or whatever. It's like, no, you did something really wrong. Like, that was really a medical error that was on you. And so, I'm sorry, I don't want to, like, shame doctors for being tired or anything, but that was the point of the show, right? That's so complex. It's a morality thing. It's not just someone is wrong or right. It's very much in the gray area of it. And that's so interesting. I really love how the show handles that balance of, like, no one is entirely right or entirely wrong at any given situation or ever in the entire stretch of the show. And so they have to constantly call each other out on their faults, on the wrong things that each side does, because that's how you can maintain the integrity of the hospital, right? I love that about this show. And another thing I love about this show is Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu is one of my favorite male protagonists of all time. And here's why. He's so nuanced, right? He's not just like, a filthy capitalist. He's really fleshed out and very human. Like, it could be so easy to portray him as like a capitalistic robot, whatever, who only wants to make money and will, do anything at the cost of the hospital. Doesn't matter as long as he's able to earn money. But as the show goes on, like, yeah, at the start he's kind of painted that way, but then when the morality needle swings to the other side of the hospital, of the management, like, you see he's a man of principle. He does call the doctors out for the things that they do, for like their clannish behavior, for their pridefulness. Like, the doctors here are very clannish. Yeah, clannish is really the word, that they just keep sticking up for each other for the sake of, we are doctors and not because we are right, or this doctor was right. He's not blinded by that, and he does not back down. Right? Like, he's really willing to go that extra mile to either earn money or call people out. Sometimes he's wrong, sometimes he's right. But like, as frustrating as it is to see that he's always just doing his job, when you say it like that way, you realize he's just doing his job. How do I explain it? He's not a mindless robot, so to speak. He's actually conflicted by some of the things he's doing. Like, at first you see him, as a capitalist robot, but eventually, as his heart warms, due to certain events, I will explain later, you see that he is very human. He's very principled. And even if he's following orders, at some point, he's still trying to push back. Like, the big bad of the show is Chairman Cho of the Wajong Group. Yeah, he's pretty much terrible. He is 100% a capitalist. But Mr. Gu is kind of in the middle of that. Like, sometimes he can acknowledge that, this will not be received well. Like, this announcement or this action will not be received well by the doctors, the nurses, the patients, and the general public. And so he'll try to, push a little bit towards the, more human side. Let's try not to go that extreme. But in the end, he cannot fight back against his master. Right? That's a sad thing to say. But yeah, he can't fight back against, the big capitalist machine. And he loses. He folds. But at least that he didn't entirely want this to happen. And he kind of just takes the brunt of it. Like, he gets berated by Chairman Cho, and he gets attacked and hated by the doctors and the nurses working under him in the hospital. And he's kind of just in the middle of it all. And he has to put up with all of it, the attacks from both sides, because he's just doing his job. Oh, Mr. Gu. And, even at the start, when you're kind of like iffy about him, like, is he a big bad? You gotta admit, he's just so smart, right? Like, every one of his big capitalist moves, like, you'd think, I should hate him, but damn, that was smart. Like, I kind of admire how he made it through that struggle, or that attack, or that exposure from Ye Jin-woo once again. Yeah. Another thing I love about Mr. Gu is how actually genuinely hardworking he is. Because he's not a doctor. And so in some like meetings or general assemblies, like, it's easy for him to be out of place among the doctors because they all know what they're talking about or whatever. And so they kind of look down on him. It's like, you don't even know what we're talking about. You don't even know why this procedure is, why we need to do this procedure, or why this is important, or this is deadly or not. But you see him studying things, studying procedures, studying medicines and dosages and whatever. Like, not in a, med school level depth of study, but you see him putting in the effort to at least understand what's going on and like what the best decisions are. right? Because he can't just make, I'll just buy the cheapest machine or whatever, or whatever the cheapest medicine is so we can save money. Like, if he were a filthy capitalist who is only, focusing on making profits, then yeah, he'd only care about the money. But he does actually study like the processes and the best types of machines or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm pulling this out of nowhere. I'm not entirely sure if he does that, but I think he would do that just to know what's going on, because he doesn't want to make uninformed decisions. And I love that about him. Like, it shows that he's taking the extra mile, the extra steps to become like an actual hospital president, hospital director, hospital president. He's really hardworking and all that. And he's very human. Like, you'd think, oh, he's probably like a born with a silver spoon rich guy who's a family friend of the Wajong Group family, owner family or whatever. But he's not. He's actually from a simple family, and it's his hard work that brought him to this level, to become this rich and this successful at such a young age, right? Like, he's still a simple person. And I love how towards the end of the show, the new hospital director and deputy director, when they were all fighting back against the chairman Cho of the Wajong Group, they had lunch with Mr. Gu. And like, they got to know him as a person, that he's actually, he's actually from a simple family, that they also suffered during like the financial crisis in the 90s. That he's actually really young compared to, the director and the deputy director who kind of work under him. And like, I just love how the show does take time to humanize him, or to see, to show that the doctors in the hospital who used to see him as like this absolute evil entity who was against all their principles as doctors, like, they got to know him. Right? They actually talked to him and asked him about himself and got to know him. And so he was humanized not only in our eyes as the audience, but also in the eyes of the other characters. I love that. Because you know what? In Startup, they never did that to Han Ji-pyong. They always just saw him as a rich boy venture capitalist, and he never got to know his past because they never asked. Ahem. Moving on, another thing I love about Mr. Gu is Cho Sung-woo. I mean, okay, he depicts both like the cold, focused, smart side of Mr. Gu, and also like the warm, human man in his late 30s living with his parents and has to ask permission from his mom to get a dog side. Like, he's he's a really, really well-written and well-acted character. And I love Mr. Gu and I love Cho Sung-woo. And now we're going to talk about what really melted the heart of the Tin Man. There is a love line in this show, and it's not what we all expected. Everyone thought, yeah, no, of course she's going to end up with Jin-woo, Lee Dong-wook's character, because it's Lee Dong-wook, and they're, long-time friends since med school. Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu is here. He's a fighter, and he did not expect to be. I mean, Sun-woo, Jinwoo's younger brother, had a crush on Noel for years and years, and he thought, my brother is my competitor. Sun-woo, it's Mr. Gu coming to get your girl. Okay, jokes aside, I mean, this is a weird love line in that we did not think there is really going to be a love line. Okay, so background once again, when we first watched this, when we were K-drama newbies, my sister and I experienced like the first major, the Filipino word is kilig. It's kind of like this giddy, happy, giggly moment. That was our very first kilig moment in K-drama. At the very end of this show, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, last 3 minutes of the show, where Mr. Gu follows Lee No-woo when she moves to a regional hospital, and they like talk to each other and walk towards the sunset. It's not as romantic as we're saying it is, but it's the shock factor, like their last moment before this was him driving away from the hospital forever, and she thought, I'm never going to see him again, because of course, why the hell would you end up seeing Mr. Gu? But surprise, surprise, last 3 minutes of the show, you get an implied good relationship, personal relationship between these two. Okay, sorry. And then the next stage of our journey with this love line is that months later, after we first watched the show, our YouTube algorithm randomly just suggested clips of these two, of their scenes in the show. And, we started talking about it again. It's like, man, life is pretty good, right? I mean, I barely remember it, but it seemed good. I feel like we'll appreciate it more if we watch it again. And yeah, the real reason why we rewatched the show is because the Noel Mr. Gu love line was recommended to us by the YouTube algorithm. And now we are here. And as we were rewatching, in hindsight, it's like, what? The build-up of this is actually really good. And they were cute. Like, nothing happened, okay? There was no kiss, there was no hug, there was barely a confession. It was a confession where you have to really read between the lines to get it. And the moments were pretty few and far in between. Not really. I mean, every episode when they started talking, like, there's a moment here. Yay, our ship is sailing. But the point is, like, it actually wasn't just shoehorned in. Like, it wasn't just, we need to humanize Mr. Gu because he's a tin can. How is he gonna become, like, a softer, warmer, kinder person? Oh, let's give him a love line and his heart is going to melt and all that. But, like, the thing is, Mr. Gu in itself is already he's a very human character. He doesn't need a love line to be humanized. He can do that by himself. Thank you very much. And the thing is, like, he doesn't need to be humanized. And two, it's not just a random, like, let's just use that woman to soften his heart. And it doesn't matter if they're compatible or not, or if they have no chemistry or whatever. The thing is, Noel is kind of the devil's advocate. She's not as clannish as the other doctors. Like, she's able to see that Mr. Gu is actually right on certain aspects. Like, he's not the enemy, right? He's saying some things that make sense, that remind us doctors that we're not always right and we're not always doing the right thing. And so she's the devil's advocate for him, at least to, Jinwoo and Chief Ju. And she is the devil's advocate who softened the devil's heart. Right? I really love the build-up. It made a lot more sense. And it was cute, okay? Like, others will say, like, it's so forced and it's so unnecessary and there's no chemistry and he's so old compared to her. And I will say, I beg to differ, but I will not fight for this ship because you know what? We triumphed. They got their implied maybe happy ending. And that's it on that. I'm good. I like this. This was a good love line that was very natural. And it also served the plot, I guess. And I loved seeing the moments. And because of them, we got to see Mr. Gu with a dog. We got to see him being low-key slightly jealous, ? And we had, a lot of misunderstanding as a trope, which I normally hate. But in this case, I love it with these two because all they do is misunderstand each other. We got a drunken, not confession, drunken rampage, drunken outrage or something. I don't know. But we got a moment where she was drunk and embarrassed for herself. And I love that. And yeah, we got a sad farewell. We got some noble idiocy. Joke. It was not noble idiocy. It's pretty great if you watch it with open eyes. I mean, like an open heart and open eyes. Like you'll appreciate this love line, low key as it is. Um, I guess something, I don't know if I don't like it or if I just didn't get it. Or didn't understand him. But Ye Jinwoo, Lee Dong-wook's character. Mm, like as I was writing my outline for this, trying to think of who he actually is, I realized Ye Jinwoo was very difficult for me to describe, like as a character. Okay, here's the thing. He has a deep backstory, right? And he's at the center of all the events, I guess. Most of the events. Or he finds a way to make himself the center of everything. He also has psychological issues. He has these hallucinations since he was a child. And like for me, personally, that should be very interesting. But it seemed like other than, instigating some of the plot lines, many of the plot lines actually, and finding a way to insert himself in the room where it happens, I could not really describe him or see like what does he do in the show other than start the conflict of this story arc. I don't know. Maybe his role is really he's an initiator. Right? And so just by doing that, by starting the conflict, he's done his part. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't interested that much in him as a character, like in the current plot. I don't know. I just feel like Mr. Gu was so strongly written and he was very much at the center of all the conflicts. And so it felt like in comparison, Jinwoo was just the initiator, and then for the rest of the story arc, it's Mr. Gu who deals with the consequences and finds a way to either win it or just accept or lose from it and get, berated by both sides yet again. But yeah, Jinwoo, me not getting Jinwoo or understanding him, maybe that's a me problem. Maybe that's not the fault of his character or the writer or anything. Another possible criticism to this is that it's kind of a bare minimum medical drama. Okay, it's like, is it, if you're here for the interesting medical cases or whatever, it's not. This is not the show for you. It's really about hospital management and politics. And I feel like that's another reason why it's so underrated. It's like, one, yeah, doesn't have like the Grey's Anatomy levels of controversial, exciting medical stories. And, the vibe is very similar to Stranger. And so people would think, this is super boring. Why would you watch this? I get it. But for me personally, I feel like there are just so many medical dramas out there. And focusing on hospital management and the politics behind it, that's super fresh. Like, for me, I guess. I haven't really watched any shows like that. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are other K-dramas out there like that. But just for me, the vast majority is, hospital drama. Yeah. And okay, I'm currently watching Dr. Romantic season 2. And sorry, I was reading some tweets about it, and some people said that they liked it less than season 1 because it was more focused on like the politics. Meanwhile, season 1 had more like cases, more interesting cases, or focused about like medical issues, prejudices against certain people with diseases like AIDS or HIV and stuff. Like, yeah, that's super interesting. I get it. But I just feel like, I don't know, season 2 for me, as I'm watching it, I really, really like it because I like hospital politics. I love power struggles. I love seeing how you can't entirely say that, the management is always wrong or the doctors are always right or the other way around. It's like, in some ways, you could agree that both of them are trying to make the hospital better, and they just have very vastly different approaches to it. And, sometimes the doctors are very complacent in their ways. They're very set in their ways. And it seems like all the hospital management does is, throw a wrench in their something. I forgot the expression. But the point is just like trying to, change up how they're working, which to them is already fine. But to the hospital management, we could be more efficient, we could do better, save more money and all that. And to the doctors, like, you're trying to mess up our hospital, right? Once again, it's so interesting. I love that. And yeah, maybe this is not the medical drama for everyone, but I really think it's super smart and super well written, and the conflict is interesting, and I love it. I love the show. Honestly, more people should watch it. Okay, maybe something that I think the writer can still improve on. Wow, as if I'm some sort of critic or something. Is that okay? They do really well with plot, and like they were getting some more like heartfelt moments here, especially with like Sunwoo and Jinwoo's relationship and all that. Like, yes, good start on having more emotions in the story, but I feel like the lines are like, it just hasn't reached the point where I would cry yet. It's like, okay, there are some like heartfelt, intense, emotional moments here. And I feel like if Shin PD, if Shin PD and writer Lee were the ones writing that part, I would be crying. I would be bawling by now. Or even like, you know, the My Mr. Writer and director, like if they wrote that intense scene, I'd be crying a puddle of tears. And I just feel like the writer is not yet there, right? In terms of like getting those intense emotions out and, you know, bringing it to the tearjerker moments. Not there yet, but I appreciate how they really tried something different, kind of different with Life compared to Stranger, at least. And I don't know, I love that. I love seeing writers try new things and kind of improve themselves bit by bit. Yeah. And yeah, I love this show. Really. I'm really sad that this show is so underrated. I mean, it's kind of sad how, you know, Stranger 1 had season 2 because of course it did so well. I understand that, but you know, if Life did much better, we could have gotten Life season 2. So it's like Chosomu every year. It's like Stranger 1, Life 1, Stranger 2, Life 2, right? And we could expand the Stranger Life cinematic universe of this writer. Like, that would have been so good, but I doubt it's going to happen. But if it ever will, oh man, I would be so happy. I would want I don't know how they would end up, what they would do in season 2 of this, but you know, knowing this writer, it's probably going to be really smart, pretty intricate, seems kind of boring at some points, but if you stick to it, it's really great and it's super worth it. Yeah, Life is really good, guys. I just feel like more people should talk about the show so that others will actually give it a chance and realize that it's really good. For me, I guess I will finish Dr. Romantic season 2 and maybe go back to season 1 because I never actually finished season 1. Because, you know, I like how they handled both. They started out as a very medical heavy drama and then they went into the hospital politics part. So that's pretty interesting. In a while after we finish watching some shows, my sister and I will rewatch Stranger 1 and 2. I will be watching it for the first time. I will try not to compare Stranger and Life because it's unfair to both of them. Like, the writer tried different things with both shows while still kind of sticking to their style. And I don't know, I'm pretty excited for that. I mean, I know it's good. It may not be for me or it may not be for everybody, but I know it's good. Just like Life. So, yeah. Thank you for listening today. Hope this helped you decide or think about giving Life a chance. And I guess I will see you soon.